Is it on now that we can? Okay, let me just go to it now so I can share it. Because hold on, I'm live now. Well, praise the Lord, everybody. I'm live. Trying to share this so that everybody can see this. Do me a favor while I'm trying to share it. I want you to share it. We're going to have a wonderful segment on tonight. It's going to be on race relations and the police. The Lord has put on my heart, laid on my heart to allow the grassroots discussions to begin in places like the church. And here we are at RCM, and at our church, we are blessed to have several uniformed members or retired uniformed members of the service. We're right here in New York City, which covers the 5 boroughs, over 8.6 million people to police. And we have several police officers, uniformed members of the service that have rose through the ranks. We have detectives, we have police officers, we have sergeants, we have lieutenants, we have various people that have worked in various places. And you have over 100 and some years of experience with this group. So I'm excited at the fact that we can use our own. A few weeks ago, I had the opportunity to have some prestigious people in law enforcement and crime analysis analysts. We have doctors, we have chiefs, we had authors of books. But today we're going to hear from our members, or the members of Restoration Christian Ministry, who serve this city and who have served for years. We have 2 retired, actually 3 retired uniformed members of the service, and yours truly is looking to do what they did. That is to retire, leaving behind a wonderful and yet colorful career. Well, I would ask you to share this wonderful message. We're going to get into some things, what happened in Minneapolis, and we're going to talk about the Atlanta shooting and some of the and Breonna Taylor's shooting has come to light again because one of the officers was indicted, actually fired rather, by the mayor. And finally, and now we're looking to see whether there's going to be some charges to come out of that. And I can't wait to actually dive into some of these things with this prestigious colleague of people. So at this time, I'm hoping that they'll just pop up on the screen and we can just start our discussion. Hey, Leon, how are you, sir? Leon Leslie.
How you doing, Pastor?
How are you, sir?
Blessed, sir. Blessed.
Good to see you, man. Good to see you. I'm going to introduce you. You're going to be my co-host today and help me navigate through these things. I'm going to introduce everybody, and I think that we can only allow a certain amount of people on, so we'll call you in to get your opinions and things. We'll give everybody an opportunity to share today. I am blessed to have within my congregation several uniformed members of the service. I'm going to just introduce them, whether they are online now or whether they're coming on, so that you can kind of get an understanding of who they are and where they're from. I have what we call the Leslies at the top, and that's retired Lieutenant Leon Leslie, and that's retired Sergeant Deborah Leslie, who actually serves as our district missionary. And right below them, we have retired Detective Jeff Faulkner, and he's going to give us also in the history of his career and where he is, where he was before he retired, rather. And we have Detective Isaiah Grigg, our Minister of Music, and he is going to also share his career up until now. He's an active detective in the NYPD. We have police officer Kenya Bolden. Kenya, so good to have you.
Thank you.
You help to balance out the equation. You and the retired Sergeant Deborah Leslie. And also we have Officer Michael Richards, one of the elders here at the church. Good to see you as well. And invigorated discussion. All right. Well, am I breaking up? Can you hear me? Can everybody hear me?
Yes, can hear you well.
Can everybody hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's a yes?
Yes.
All right, wonderful. All right, so before we even continue on, awesome. I just want to just get a brief, and when I say brief, a brief snapshot of who you are and in your career. I want to get a brief snapshot of who you are, what you've done, and let it be the 60-second rule, so we can go around and beginning with the Leslies. You got Leon Leslie and his wife, retired Sergeant Deborah Leslie. I would like to get a brief snapshot of who you are, what you've done, so we can know what is being brought to the table, and then we're going to start our mini discussion.
God bless you. Thank you, Dr.
Go on, the Leslies.
Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, we can.
Okay. God bless you.
Yes, go on.
Dr. Campbell, I'm glad to be here on this forum. Thank you for having me. My name is Deborah Leslie. I am a retired New York City police sergeant. Started my career in April of 1991, and I retired on 2011, July of 2011. When I started my career, I was placed in the 83rd Precinct in Brooklyn, the Bushwick section of Brooklyn. Then shortly after that, I took the exam, rose to the rank of sergeant, and went to the 70 Precinct, which is the southern part of Brooklyn. And then before I retired, several years before I retired, I went over to Applicant Processing Division, where I was the Integrity Control Officer, and I retired as such in 2011.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Your husband?
How you doing? God bless.
Leon?
God bless, Pastor. Thank you for having us on this forum. My name is Leon Leslie. I retired lieutenant from the NYPD. I started my career as a police officer in the 94th Precinct, at which time maybe 3 years on the job I went to narcotics. I went from narcotics to vice. I went from vice to the 81st Precinct when I got promoted. Actually, I got promoted in vice as a detective. And then I went from there to the 81st Precinct. I got promoted to sergeant. And from there, I went to the Internal Affairs Bureau, where we did investigations into school safety. From the Internal Affairs Bureau, I went to Vice, which I was in Brooklyn. I was actually in Queens Vice. I was in Manhattan North Vice and Brooklyn South Vice. And I got promoted out of Vice to lieutenant. I went to the Brooklyn Court Section. I was the ICO. And then I got moved to Manhattan, where I had citywide jurisdiction. I was the commanding officer of the Criminal Justice Bureau Investigations Unit, where we did internal investigations in the police department.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you for your service, and thank you for your dedication. Detective Faulkner, retired. I know you didn't hear that in a while. Jeff,
Sure
could you give us your pedigree?
Sure. Good afternoon, and thank you for having me on the forum. My name is Jeff Faulkner. I joined the NYPD in 1990. I went to the Transit Bureau Division. At that time, it was Transit Police Department. It wasn't merged yet. Worked in Transit District 11. I spent approximately 6 years from 1990 to 1996, working in plain clothes for the most part, where I worked anti-crime and pickpockets. After the merge, they took some transit guys and brought them into NYPD, and I went to OCCB as an investigator in narcotics division, where I was basically a ghost following the undercover and also handling some cases. After that, I went to the Nitro unit in OCCB, where we tracked all the different arrests that happened throughout the city. And they needed a liaison to go to the Manhattan North Borough, where I worked in the PIMS unit, and I worked with the 7 major crimes of the city. And I was transferred back to OCCB, where I worked in the gun unit and did a little short stint there before I was pulled down to Community Affairs Division under Chief Ziegler, and worked with the community affairs personnel of all the different precincts in New York City, where I concentrated basically on the Bronx and Manhattan. And that's where I retired from in 2010.
Awesome. Awesome. Now, a lot of the people who are watching, you know, they don't really know about the acronyms. So the PIMS unit is the Pattern Identification Modular Unit. The OCCB, which is no longer, they were merged now with the Detective Bureau, and that used to be the Organized Crime Control Bureau. So thank you very much. Our cop lingo is exclusive to us, but I really, really, truly appreciate your testimony. All right, Sydney, come on, tell us where you are and where you work. Come on, Sydney. All right, we have a problem with Sydney, Kenya.
Hello, everyone. My name is Kenya Bolden, Police Officer Bolden. I started my career off in the 5th Precinct, which is located in Lower Manhattan in Chinatown. Also, in my capacity in the 5th Precinct, I worked as a patrol officer as well as a counterterrorism officer. I have 14 and a half years on the job. I currently work for Housing Bureau, which is located in headquarters, and I work with executives where my role is working. I do intake for all the major incidents that happen in the city, and what I do is I type up reports to send those incidents to our executives in the in the office. So that's what my current role is. Really happy to be a part of the police department for the time that I have, and have had a great experience so far.
All right, good. Let's cut. Go on, introduce yourself, Greg, and then I want to get into the meat.
Hey everybody, my name is Detective Isaiah Grigg. I came on a PD in 2006. I started in Transit Bureau as well. I went from Queens to Brooklyn, where I did what we call IRP, which is response team, task force, and anti-crime kind of balled into one. From there, I went to Transit Anti-Terrorism Unit, which is a subsidiary to Counterterrorism Bureau in Manhattan North. I served there for about a year and a half before I moved on to the Internal Affairs Bureau, where I stayed there and did criminal investigations for about 4 or 5 years. And from there, I transferred to Strategic Response Group, where I am currently located back in Brooklyn, where we handle disorder control, heavy weapons, most newsworthy shootings, active shooters, and things of that nature. So thank you for being here. Looking forward to getting started.
All right, thank you. Just let everybody know, all the moving around, anything that you're doing, we kind of hear. So if you could do that and mute your phone, we appreciate it. Thank you so much, Kenya. All right, let's just hit the round running. Sydney, let me just give you a quick opportunity, Sydney. All right, yes, Sydney, introduce yourself.
Hello, can anyone hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now. Introduce yourself. Introduce yourself. Can you introduce yourself? I don't think she hears us. All right, we'll just have to move on. Thank you, everyone, for introducing yourself and giving us a quick snapshot of who you are and what you do. But now let's get into it. Let me just give the disclaimer. We are not representing the NYPD. Neither are we representing the job in any official capacity at this time. We are representing Restoration Christian Ministries, which the logo is right behind me. I am the pastor, senior pastor of Restoration Christian Ministry, and all of these are members of our church. We are also uniform members of the New York City Police Department, and we are going to share our experience and our expertise in regarding the current events that are happening right now. And I wanted to make that disclaimer to let everyone know that we're not official representatives of the police department at this time, but we are members of the service as we do. We will say by day, but every other day and every other time, we are really members of the Kingdom of God in Restoration Christian Ministries, and we actually want to share our testimony. So there's been a lot happening, and I think that people really need to know or see behind the blue. Everyone has their opinion of what this is, the blue wall of silence, and we're going to talk about that tonight. Lieutenant, I'm just going to call him Lieutenant Leslie. We know he's retired, but Lieutenant Leslie, he's going to be my co-host tonight and help me navigate through this. But I just want to say, let's deal with the myths, because what we're talking about tonight is race relations and police reform. And we know that there's issues regarding race around the country in regards to policing. But the first thing I want to deal with tonight is because most people, when they put you in the uniform, they have an us versus them mentality. And some police officers, when they're in the uniform, they have a us versus them mentality. And we want to just unanimously share this whole culture of this blue wall of silence thing. I want to deal with this because everybody seems to think that that's something that we actually sign up for, or that's something. And feel free. I'm not going to. Does anyone believe in the blue wall of silence, and does it affect you?
Well, as far as race is concerned, race is it's a learned experience, right? And so in every segment of society, we have the passing on of the baton from one elder to a child. Children are not born racist. They've learned this from their parents. So we go into the police department, and our expectation is that everybody's blue. We're all going to take care of each other. But everybody brings values into the police department as they come into the police department. So a 22 or 21-year-old kid doesn't have that much experience, but they come into the police department with what they have. Most of it they bought from home.
I think when it comes to the blue wall of silence, I do believe it is a real thing. Do I as an individual see myself solely attached to it? No, I think that's where the individual comes into play, and you maintain who you are and what you stand for in the middle of where you work. I think even if whether or not you're in the corporate America or whether or not you're a police officer, I think your identity is what your identity is. As LT was saying, you don't come in. How you come in is who you are, right? So I think there is a distinction that can be made between the blue wall of silence, but also who you are. And I think it is our job to maintain that identity, whether or not there's a blue wall or not.
I truly believe that when we each come on the job, we all bring sort of biases with us. Mm-hmm. But as far as the blue wall of silence is concerned, people make assessments or assumptions about you when you come through the door. One of the things that you do is you bring all your culture with you when you come through the door. So if they really visualize who you are, there's certain things they just won't do in front of you.
True.
And I have to agree with Detective Greg that we say that there is a blue wall of silence, but when I was on the job, I never believed that I was a part of that blue wall of silence. I never believed in the blue wall of silence.
How about you, Jeff?
Well, I believe that there is a blue wall of silence, but silence, because when you're out there working with these officers for 8 hours a day, they tend to become like family. Not only do you work with them, but if you have a partner, you tend to go to your kids' birthday parties. You start to go to barbecues with them. So you become a family with them, and you know that their life is in your hands and your life is in their hands. So it's like a brother almost. So a lot of things that they do, just like your brothers and sisters in your family, that are not acceptable, you tend to kind of look over them unless it's something that's outrageous. So we, as police officers, tend to try to stop each other from getting into trouble. and you don't want to appear to be a person who's going to squill on your brother, because everybody in that precinct will turn on you. It goes beyond race sometimes. I think it's just that culture of police officers who say we are an army of one.
And so,
hold one second. I mean, thank you so much, Leon. I just want to just jump in on that. Let's face it. He said 8 hours. You know, I always say 8 hours and 35 minutes, but let's face it. We spend way more than 8 hours and 35 minutes a day with the uniformed members of the service. We work around the clock sometimes. We work long ones. We work from not 4 to 12s. We all know 4 to 4s. Because by the time we get off of work, if we don't get any overtime that night, there's nobody that's awake when we go home. So we spend a lot of time, more than just 8 hours a day with the people that we work with. We spend most of the day. So most of our time are spent with the people that we work with, rather than even our family. And unfortunately, I know people stigmatize cops loving donuts, but truth be told, most of us that work those 4 to 12 hours on that are in the street, we eat out every day. We don't eat. I've never really ate in a donut shop, but I certainly ate in a lot of good restaurants. And if you're eating together, you're bonding together. So there is a culture there is a police culture, and even when you're stopped driving, or there's a car stop or anything that we could do, there's something called professional courtesy that speaks beyond your local municipality, because there is some quote unquote a brotherhood within within policing. This is a unique job. It's a hard job. We are couple steps away from death, and we're a couple steps away from the jail cell ourselves. So in every radio run, I remember my law professor, Smalls, he said, every radio run you go to, every dispute you go to a gun run. I was like, what? He said, it's all a gun run because you have a gun. And every time you show up, there's a gun present. So every time you answer the radio, there's a gun present at the scene, and it's yours. So a very, very dangerous job. Leon, I'll give it back to you. You wanted to comment on that blue wall of culture.
Yeah, I just wanted to say to my brother Jeff, I totally agree with you that we have to sit in that car with them for a number of hours, and that person actually bonds with us. There are certain degrees that, for me anyway, when I was on patrol and throughout my entire career, there was just some things that are correctable, and some things that just are intolerable. And those things that are intolerable, we handle them immediately, in my mind anyway.
I mean, I think that the blue wall of silence is so strong that if we were all just to get in a car and drive to, say, like Florida, and we saw a state trooper in Maryland wrestling with somebody, we would automatically get out and help the state trooper. That's how strong that blue wall of silence is. We don't think about, did the person do something right? Did they do something wrong? We automatically try to defend that cop that's out there.
I guess
let me interject, because Jeff, you brought up a wonderful and valid point that if we see our brother in quote unquote blue in need, state troop or whatever, we will run to their aid. But that's more of a blue wall. Blue wall of silence is being silent behind the wall. So, which is a distinction. So you're describing the unity of the brotherhood, or let's just say the blue wall. And I agree that there is a systematic wall. There is a wall that goes beyond race. It's a culture that is unique. Just like nurses, you may be in one state, and because of this crisis of COVID-19, you may flew into New York City or in other states, and you just it was a culture that you're familiar with, and you was able to help out even though you were in another state, because that's your profession. So we do have let's just call it a blue wall. But what I'm trying to get to is the blue wall of silence, is that there's some things that are only shared behind the wall, and there are some things that are only done behind the wall. And I wanted to speak to, is this a fictitious thing, or does it exist? And I think we've already had the dialogue that it does exist. Leon is saying that it did not exist for him because there's some things that he just never gave into. But here we have Jeff is giving a more realistic point of view from his point of view, that he believes that those roots are deeper than just personalities. Because you spend so much time with the person, that there is a sense of loyalty or a pressure. I believe somebody said, people in the precinct will isolate you if you don't have a sense of belonging.
Yes.
So, all right, and that's what Kenya brought out.
Yeah.
Greg, what is your take on that? And as we bring up,
Well, I agree with both. I think the blue wall is what creates the silence, because at the end of the day, if you say we're protecting each other, we're bonding, we're growing, we're learning about each other's families, we're making relationships that realistically kind of almost go deeper than some of our personal relationships outside of the job, because we share so much, you exchange in so many different things going on, that you develop that loyalty. So when it's tried, right, that's when that silence part comes into play, because now you have to decide, is that friendship, is that loyalty worth putting on the line to do the right or the wrong thing? And you have to have strong enough shoulders to be able to handle the blowback of making that choice. So the blue wall is, the silence thing is, we can't be naive about it. It's real. It's
It
real.
is.
It's real. It's real today. And I think that, more and more of us, as time progresses and as, things evolve, we're now having to be put in a visible position to make those decisions. You know what I'm saying? Whether or not that's silence. You know what I'm saying?
Okay, Leon.
Yeah, just a quick experience about what my vantage point. What I'm trying to say is, like, if someone commits a felony, you have to take action. If they're driving in a car, sometimes you can use discretion and let them go. I had an experience where I went to a landlord-tenant dispute. When we got there, with my steady partner and my friend, we ring the bell, and the gentleman comes to the door, and it's a sergeant from the NYPD. And he says, you guys can go. We don't need you. And I said, did you call? He said, no. He said, the tenant upstairs called. I said, well, just let me check with her. And when I check with her, then we'll be out of here, Sarge. Right? And I'm a police officer at the time. My partner grabs me by the arm and says, yo, man, let's go. And I said, you're out of your mind. Right? And so I start to walk up the stairs, and he can stay there if he wants, but I need to see what's going on before I get out of it. Right? I get to the top of the stairs, the door's broken off the hinges, there's glass all over the place, furniture is broken up. What do we have? We have a situation where we need to call the boss, right? So once I'm telling my partner, listen, I left my radio in the car. I said, my partner, call the boss. He tells me no. So to make a long story short, we call the boss, we're absolved, and the cop ends up getting in trouble. But that, sometimes the sergeant ends up getting in trouble, but sometimes that's what happens.
All right. Well, listen, go ahead. Come on, Kenya. And I'm going to go after you.
Okay. I was going to say what is interesting is, all of us on this panel, we are Black and blue. So we both serve the Black community as well as the blue community. And, what's interesting with this whole blue wall of silence is, many of us, we came on the job for a reason. And some of us have come in, to make certain changes, like because of experiences that we have experienced, as a young person, as a teen, as a young adult, and police interaction. And if those police interactions weren't positive, with some of us or many of us, we wanted to come into the department to make some changes. So when you come into the department with that type of mentality and with the blue wall and trying to, you don't necessarily want to expose like everything that's, happening, but you want to at least, make it right. So if you see something wrong, you're going to try and correct it while you're there. That's what many people do when coming into the job, and they want to make that change. And what a lot of people don't understand is, there are people behind the scenes, even though they don't see it on an everyday basis. There are people behind the scenes that are trying to make these changes and trying to break down the blue wall of silence, and just correcting the issues so we don't have like these incidents that happen with many of the people that have lost their lives in the hands of police officers. So
well, we're going to get into that. I just wanted to start out, come out the gate with this whole thing of the blue wall of silence, because the truth be told, I wanted to bring some credibility to the discussion. Leon was dead on when he said, and I'm so grateful that Jeff brought the balance as well. That he said, listen, there's no blue wall for me. I mean, if I see something wrong, I'm saying it. I'm my own man. That's how I think. Everybody does not necessarily have that confidence. Some people are drafted in the culture and they lose their identity. Very good, Kenya. We are black and blue, and some of us, unfortunately, lose our blackness with the blue. And this is nothing against our white counterparts that are watching. You always white, and we're always black, and we all can get along. God made us who we are, but we should never lose ourselves in an organization to forget where we've come from and forget who we are. The truth be told, every time we forget, when we get into certain circumstances and certain environments, they remind us in other places. So you cannot forget who you are, and you cannot forget whose you are, and you cannot forget the oath that you have taken and the job that we are to do. The reality is there is a pressure or a culture that tells us that, we're to stick together. You can see it now in Atlanta, Georgia. You can see it now. There's rumors that in the New York City that on the 4th of July, there's going to be a tremendous walkout, and there's going to be everybody's going to call out sick. There's a lot of things that's happening. Should police officers stick together? Absolutely. But should we stand up when we see corruption? Absolutely. And the question is there categories, or is there rooms or categories or classifications behind the wall? Although we're all blue, are we all accepted all the time? Although we're all blue, do we all have the same opportunity? Although we're all blue, does the same rule apply for everybody that's in blue that applies to us? That's the question. Let us just did y'all hear my question? Although we're all blue, are there classifications behind the wall? Although we're all blue, does everything that apply to them apply to us? Because we're black and blue. Is it different behind the wall of blue for us than it is for everybody else? That's a question.
Yes.
Yes.
All right. Well, tell me why. Come on. Talk to me. Talk to me. Because we're going somewhere. Talk to me.
Most of the time in my career, especially like with things like getting into details and units and stuff like that, you have the higher ups, which is a majority of them are, white officers or white supervisors. They'll get their nephews, their friends and stuff like that into units way before we can get into it. We got to work just a little bit harder and to get into the same units that somebody who just came out of the academy with 2 years on the job will get into a unit because their uncle is somebody. Even if they get in trouble, that same supervisor will protect them, where they'll just throw us into the fire and transfer us and change our tours and do all types of stuff. So you'll see a lot of different standards when it comes to black people and white people.
Okay, that's been your experience, and now you've been out of the department for a good 10 years, right?
Correct.
All right. So let's hear from someone that is actually in the department. You got Greg, and let's bring on Jeff. I heard from you. Let me just put you aside. Let's bring on some of the younger people. Allison, you can bring on some of the younger folks. While we're doing that, come on, Greg and Sydney. I'm going to give you two a crack at it while we're bringing some of these guys in.
Sydney, you want to go first, or?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Can anybody hear me? Okay, yes, I would agree with that as far as saying that it's not the same for Black people to get opportunities to move into different units. It's usually said it's who you know. So people that usually know people are moved into units of their preference before people of color, if it be that way.
Let me hold on, Sydney. I hate to cut you, but Jeff gave a perspective, and I have to say that things have changed a lot over the 30 years span of his tenure. We have a lot of executives that are people of color. We have a lot of chiefs now that are people of color, black and brown. We have a lot of people
Right.
that rose through the ranks, and we have the Leslies. Leon Leslie Jr. is happened to be on, and his parents, both of his parents, were supervisors in the NYPD. A combination of over 40 years of experience together, and I'm certain that they've known and learned a few people in the ranks that are now super chiefs or executives that know them and that are treating Leon Leslie Jr. pretty well. So I just want to give a balanced perspective for the whole entire audience that's watching. That it's just not just a black and white scenario. We're here too. This is not 1970. This is not even 1990. This is 2020. So let's be real. My original question, I appreciate Jeff bringing that up, but I just want to balance this whole discussion. My question is, behind the blue, is it the same for us as it is for them? Because where I'm going is we're going to deal with all of these things that are happening around the country, but we have to make a distinction behind the wall. Are we all the same, or is there a difference? Go on, Sydney.
No, I don't think we all are all the same. I think there is a difference, and that would I don't know why. I mean, I'm assuming that they just don't see us as equal.
Who's they?
The white people. They don't see us as
really
equal counterparts.
Okay.
I feel that way.
Is that the majority, or do you think that's just a small handful? NYPD is huge. It's 38,000 people. Well,
right.
uniform members of the service.
Well, where I am, which is the 18th.
Don't listen. Don't put yourself. You're still there. I don't want you to put yourself. We don't want you to do that. We don't want you to do that. All right. Well, you have spoken. Isaiah, you want to jump in? You want to jump in? Thank you, Sydney.
Oh, man. Foul on the play. Listen, is it different? Absolutely. I think the main thing that I've personally experienced, or I can only speak for me on this one, is a sort of classism in terms of how they rank your pedigree in terms of your intellectual stability in what you're trying to do. Are you smart enough? Do you know enough? Where'd you get your information from? What unit did you come from compared to the unit that you're trying to go? Me personally, I've been denied. I've been blocked. I've been pushed to the side. I've been passed over from positions that I know I deserved and know I earned. So I believe there is a different status quo, and definitely a different, I'll say a different, a different length of rope that we're given, you know what I'm saying, in terms of getting where we want to go. But also, and I mean, I hope I don't offend anybody, it's been from all cultures. I've been blocked by Hispanics. I've been blocked by whites. I've been blocked by blacks. You know what I'm saying? So I think there's a distinction there as well, that sometimes we kind of kick each other in the shins in terms of the competitiveness of what we're trying to get to. But in terms of the any influxes in discriminatory behavior, stuff like that, absolutely. I've had bosses tell me on both sides, this is not the unit for you. And then I've had some tell me this is the unit for you because of the texture of your skin or your skin color. You know what I'm saying? So it's gone both ways as to where they feel they need me or where they feel they don't.
Okay. Well, I appreciate that. Thank you very much for sharing. The reason why I bring this up, and I know this is a tough topic, is because, and I appreciate what Jeff said, and Jeff really opened up a can of worms that we have to deal with. And he talked about the differences that's happening. And I just said, because things have changed, because we are in 2020, is there still relevant? Two people just said they are. So, Mr. Junior, Leon Jr., we're coming for you. Coming from an insulated family of a retired lieutenant, retired sergeant, growing up in a police culture, understanding, being mentored to be a police officer, coasting through the academy, understanding and probably knowing your CO that you went to, having a relationship with. Give us a little background, about your experience and how you have behind this blue wall. Has it been fair for you? Or have you had a head start? Come on, talk to us.
I believe that for me it's a different situation because I have my parents there. They kind of, you know, they paved the way for me. So for me it's a little bit different. But as far as being a fair playing field, it isn't for blacks compared to others. It's not fair, and I believe that we have to give 110%. We have to be above average. We have to be excellent in order to be almost on the same playing field as other people. And
Now, how much time do you have? How much time do you have, Leon Jr.?
I have 4 years on the job.
Four years on now. 4 years on the job. Now we just spoke to a retired detective that retired in 2010. So he began his career 30 years ago. All right. Then we have only your parents only started a year after him. They was in the April 91 class. So we got all of this time gaps, and we're still talking about this. Now you must believe that you must believe. Hold on, comment. Please keep her comment there. You must believe that other people are watching. So our white counterparts are watching. It's interesting. They want to hear what you hear. I think it's important for them to hear how you feel. We have a lieutenant that is active, Angie Ozuna. She says, I honestly believe the opportunities are there in the NYPD when you speak up for yourself and know your rights and strive for excellence. Yes, Angie, we actually all do believe that there are opportunities there, the truth be told. What unit do you work in, Leon Leslie, Jr.?
I'm working in a citywide traffic task force. I'm like inside of a unit of citywide traffic task force in Transportation Bureau operations.
All right, so you're not on patrol.
No, I'm not on patrol.
Yeah, and you don't have 5 years, so you've already experienced some of that excellence and that grace, or that pave your way to a more, not to say that you're not working hard, but you cannot say that you don't have opportunity. I just wanted to say that because there's some other people watching, and you have you ever heard the fact that people feel that there's reverse discrimination? I just want to help the people that are watching that happen to be white. That listen, I need you to kind of hear what's going on, especially on this Juneteenth day. That it is harder for people of color, and it's a fact. But as Angie Ozuna, Lieutenant Ozuna said, if there is opportunities that are there, I have benefited from it, and I can talk about my opportunities. And her opportunities, she says, honestly, she believes that opportunities are there when you speak up for yourself, you know your rights, and you strive for excellence. You have to strive for excellence, and you have to work hard. You have to study. One thing I can say, Leon Senior was a part of an Eagle program that helped black officers get promoted through the ranks. And one thing about at least the NYPD is that it's a civil service exam. You can promote yourself. Nobody can discriminate with you up until the rank of captain. So you can study. You can promote yourself to sergeant. You can promote yourself to lieutenant. You promote yourself to captain. There is no discrimination that's in that. So I want everybody to there's no discrimination in that. You promote yourself. So there is opportunity for not only men, but also women. Now we have a couple women on the line, and I'll talk later in the show about whether it's different for women. And I know it's different for women. I'm just going to say it is. So what I wanted to get to, and I was trying to get through this the long way, I wanted to say, because the public perceives that there's this blue wall of silence and everybody just behind this wall going like this, that's not the case. I wanted you to see that there was some ruffles behind the wall. In other words, behind the blue wall, there was some discussions going on. There was some conflict going on. There were some people saying that we are not created, we're not treated the same way. We don't have the same opportunities. Not that there's not there, but this is not a perfect situation behind the wall. Okay. Now, we have never left our community. And most of the time, unfortunately, we are riding in a patrol car with people that have never been to our communities, that have probably seen it on television, that have never had any interaction with our communities. And now they are charged after 6 months of training to police our community. And that's where other kind of conflict goes in. So now we're saying that, the public is saying they just see us as a blue wall, but we have conflict in the cars. We have conflict on patrol. We have conflict doing the verticals. And I want to talk about that. Is there conflict doing your job at times? Does anybody speak to that? Policing our community?
I wouldn't say okay, sometimes, when you're partnered with someone, sometimes you do bump heads and you guys both don't see eye to eye on certain things. So someone may handle a situation a certain way. You may not see that way they handle it best fit. And that does cause some conflict, in that partnership. So sometimes with those type of conflicts, it does kind of break the partnership. Some people are not able to work with someone if they can't come to an agreement, in those type of situations. So yeah, there are conflicts that happen.
Thank you, Kenya. But I'm speaking. This topic is race relations and police reforms. We know that there's issues of race in the various police departments around the country. What I'm speaking to is not personality conflicts. I'm speaking to, has anyone encountered a harder tone or people looking at people from our community? If we can get Michael Richards in here, I think I would love that. We can put Michael in here. Can anybody speak to that?
Pastor, can I add something? Just going back a little bit, I just wanted to add that no one would argue that in this country there's a devastating financial disparity between African Americans and other communities. The wealth has been stolen from us, right? And so we coming to the police department at a point where at times they wouldn't even allow a black officer into the department, right? So we already know that we're working from a deficit. So I just wanted to speak to that because of the simple fact that when you ask, are we on par? Keeping up with them? We should have been far ahead had we not been robbed.
Okay, I respect that. Please mute it if you're not talking. I'm hearing background noise. Okay, so let's get back to my question. Has anybody encountered a tone of policing that they had to check behind the wall? Because what I want the people to know that there is, everybody talk about, behind the wall. I appreciate diversity within police departments. I think there should be more. And the more diversity you have, the more conflicts you will have behind the wall to balance our policing techniques. I'm not going to allow anybody to just come in and police my people with a heavy hand just because they look a certain way or you may not understand their culture. And I've rode with some folks, and I've rode with some folks, and we were in the Manhattan North, the upper precincts, the 3-4, the 3-3, the 3-0, and people were out there selling stuff in carts and had their oranges out there and had their different things out there for people to eat. And then one of the officers sitting next to me, he's like, look at these dirty people eating out here, da 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 da. And I said, man, have you ever been to the Dominican Republic? Have you ever been to the islands? Have you ever been? I mean, if you've gone and exposed yourself to the culture, you wouldn't see that you wouldn't see it as dirty. You would see it as culture. And sometimes people look down on things that they do not know or not familiar with, and they call it dirty. They call it nasty. So now you're classifying a group of people that you're policing, and now when you go to them, you're treating them as if they're dirty people that eat off the street, that if they're dirty people. And that's the kind of problem that we have to have. So there is implicit biases that are in some of our policing, and I want to bring the point that there is conflict behind the wall.
Yeah.
that this blue wall of silence is not just perfect wall that we just are singing kumbaya behind the wall. There's a little conflict going on behind the wall. Let's talk about, but now I have to say, and I wanted to bring that point, Leslie, you wanted to jump in, go on.
Yes, Pastor, there is conflict behind the wall. I've had the experience that I don't know if anyone have heard of Carriol Horn. She was a police officer in Buffalo, and in 2008, she got fired for speaking up, against her. I guess it was her partner, or whoever she was with. This other officer was choking someone out, and she tried to prevent him, and she stopped it. She did stop it, but the end result was she got fired. And I have had that similar experience when I was on the job. Police officer was doing something wrong that I was working with, and I spoke up about it. And he was a Caucasian officer, and because I spoke up, the job put me through the ringer. They tried to suspend me. They tried to, they couldn't suspend me, so they tried to send me to investigations to get days taken away from me because I spoke up. And then I was treated as if, you know what, she's a rat. I was labeled. Because I spoke up against the abuse of the partner that day that I had. I spoke up, and it wasn't well taken. So
conflict behind the wall. So
yes,
yes, I'm very, very familiar with that police officer who was fired and lost her pension, and now because of the George Floyd case, her case is being revisited, and hopefully she will be able to get her pension back. She actually almost fought the police officer because he was abusing and choking the individual, and she pushed him off of him and tried, and they actually fired her
yes.
shortly after that. So and in your case, I'm so sorry, thank God that you were not fired as a result of that, but you were, from what you say, ostracized, and you were labeled because you spoke up against what's going on. Ladies and gentlemen, I just wanted to give you this, and I know it was arduous, but there's conflict behind the wall. Now, I have to say we get along with more cops than we disagree, then we don't get along with the people that are quote unquote abusive. There's a lot of wonderful relationships that we had with all cultures. So we're not just us against them. It's not black and white thing, not at all. We all have friends and people that we love that are black, that are white officers, and they're good people. But there is a tone and a culture that we have to deal with, and we have to deal with the hard things. This is Juneteenth, and for those of you that don't know, Juneteenth is the day where all of the slaves received the notice of emancipation, of the proclamation that was done, and should have been received in January 1st of 1863. But there were some folks in Texas that didn't know about it. And in 1865, 2.5 years later, they became free. What we're doing is we're spreading the message and the news of freedom. We are behind the wall. And we want to send up a flare to those people that are in the community that cannot get behind this wall, so you can actually see what the wall looks like. So at this point in time, we want you to ask questions. And we're going to go into some scenarios now, but we want you to shoot some questions at us in regards to behind the wall, what we have to deal with behind the wall. There is no harmony. There's not perfect harmony behind the wall. We have a lot of conflicts behind the wall, and it's good because we're bringing balance to the former. I want to talk about Minneapolis. We cannot talk about anything without including what happened to George Floyd. This is the reason, unfortunately, and I would like to tie for this wonderful, prestigious panel, George Floyd to Eric Garner. There was distinctions and parallels, and I want to talk about the distinctions and parallels of the George Floyd and Eric Garner case. Eric Garner obviously was Staten Island. We understand that he was the first person that was choked by a police officer, one of our colleagues who was fired. And that's hence we got the whole phrase, "I can't breathe." 6 years later, we're talking about the same thing, but this time, instead of just pulling a person down to try to get him arrested. Now we have a person that's already been cuffed with his knee on his neck and allowing him for almost 9 minutes to suffer and cry out and beg for air and saying, I can't breathe. What's the similarities and what's the differences? Let's talk about this. Leon.
Which Leon?
Senior. I'm always gonna call Junior.
Okay, and so you have a situation where breath was taken away, and God gives breath, right? And so no man should take your breath away, right? And it was like one of the most egregious murders that I've ever seen in my life. A man begged for his life and then asked for his mother before he passed. That's egregious. And it should never happen to anyone. And there should be a lot of policies changed. You have legislation that's put forward by Cory Booker and Harris, and it should be implemented, put into place so that things like this can not happen again. They have to see, you have to see people as human. You have to see a person as human before you can really respect who they are. You have to look at them and see that they're human beings.
Very good. So what are the similarities and what are the changes? Let me just hear Shane and White. Will there be some type of reform regarding one officer intervening when another officer is abusing their authority? Now, very, very, very good question, Shane and White. I'll just go on and jump on and answer that. Number one, there is legislation that is already going into place that if there is some criminality afoot and the other officer does not intervene, that other officer will himself or herself be included in that criminality. There will be, just like you're hanging out with your friends and they decide to rob a bank, but you're sitting out there with the car and you're driving away. You're accessory to the crime. So that's going to also be applied to police officers that do not stop things when they see it. Now, the question is, they may not always see things the same way you see things. And I would say we may not, what you think is a crime, we may not think is a crime. A lot of the videos that I see on social media, a lot of the time I see a person resisting. Now, don't get me wrong. We know what happened here. This was no resistance. This was utterly, and I agree with Leon, Lieutenant Leslie. I agree with him that this was murder. But there are times when a police officer must use the necessary minimum amount of force to effect the arrest. And if a person is resisting, that does not stop. I have to do certain situations, I have to take you. Domestic violence situation, they're mandated arrests. There's no discretion. I have to take you in. If you are resisting, I have to force you. It's not easy to force a person hands behind their back, especially if they're fighting. So I have to up that's why I have a mace for. That's why I have a baton for. I don't have a baton, to twirl around. The baton is a stick. You use it by striking a person. It's given to you as a non-lethal weapon. No one has. I've never seen a person happy to see a police officer utilize their baton or their asp, but it is a necessary tool to use to subdue a perpetrator. We never want to see the uniformed person win, unfortunately, because of the abuse and the systematic oppression that we have seen and over-policing that we've experienced coming up in our urban cities. But I have to say that it is necessary at times for force to be used. And when you're recording, and I may agree with my partner, and you may be telling me stop, and I may get in and I may hit him too. So I just want, Shane, I hope you're understanding my answer that yes, there are times when you are going to stop your partner if you see over abuse, but you're going to say, oh, look, and I'll jump in and I'm assisting my partner, because what you see as over abuse, I see as resisting arrest. I see as fighting the police. I see as not complying. So a lot of people jump to conclusion and jump to judgment because they don't even know the scenario. And a lot of times the video recording stops midway, and there's a whole situation that happens prior to the video recording. So I will say that those reforms are coming, and those reforms are already here. If there's any corruption that is done, we are mandated to report corruption now. You don't need a reform for that. We are mandated reporters. If we, especially as supervisors, we have no discretion. We have to report to the Internal Affairs Bureau if we see or hear any corruption within our purview. All right.
But the blue wall stops. The blue wall stops some of that reporting, and now what we have is basically systemic racism. So to handle the systemic racism, I think that the most important thing that happened with the George Floyd incident was that those other officers were arrested, because now every officer in the United States is looking and going, I better jump in. I better jump in.
Not for nothing. Nothing on Lieutenant Leslie. When I saw that video, I wanted to jump through the screen. I would have pummeled that, or I would have jumped on Derek Chauvin. I would have jumped on him. I mean, they would have. I don't know what would have happened to me, but I would have jumped on him. I was livid when I saw it, and I'm screaming, "Get off his neck! Get off his neck!" We all was like that. So I don't really see any wiggle room there for you to be standing there protecting your fellow officer while he's killing a black man, another human being. Dahlia Condi Adams says, it's a question from her, how do you feel about the talks of defunding the police departments? How do you feel about the talks of defunding the police department? I'm going to give that to y'all, and I'm going to give my opinion on that. And I have not been opinionated yet, so you're going to hear some stuff from me. Come on, who wants to take that? How do you feel about defunding the talks of defunding the police department? Thank you, Dahlia.
Well, personally, I believe it's an unrealistic idea, and this is just purely my opinion. I understand and can almost empathize with the origin of the idea, but is it really feasible in our neighborhoods to say, hey, in the time that we're living in, to take cops away from the neighborhoods? No. Do you want to see your grandmother getting, robbed at 2 o'clock in the morning in the elevator in the projects? No, you don't. Do you want less training for the officers? No, you don't. Do you want to take these resources away from the neighborhoods that really need them? No, you don't. Is it something that would be fruitful for the world as a whole to defund the police? No, it doesn't. And I've also heard of community policing on another level where, the community polices itself, which is not a great idea either. One example I've used with buddies of mine is like, what are you going to do when you have to check somebody that you grew up with for the last 20 years on the block, and they tell you no? What's your next course of action? And I think, as all of us can say, that when you first got on the job and you heard that word no for the first time, and then you had to react to it, what you gonna do? You got to do something. That's your charge.
You know what?
Thank you.
I was gonna say, what's interesting too, because I'm part of Noble, and we do these scenario-based things that with the community, and many times, like when the roles are reversed and we have the community play the police role, they always state that they find it very difficult when they're in the shoes of the officer and the person is not complying. So it's like when we pose these type of scenarios to the community, they could really kind of get a sense of what the officer is experiencing, because they're then in those type of scenarios are placed in the officer's shoes. So I think that's something that
back off that. I think what we should do, I think we do need to develop ways for communities to understand what it really is to be law enforcement, because I think the perception around it isn't really understood. That feeling that you get on the back of your neck, when you walk into a situation you don't know if you're coming out of, or when you have to go into the same neighborhoods of people that look like you, whether or not you're black or white, and you have to deal with somebody who's looking at you as if you've betrayed them. It's different. It's a different feeling, and I think sometimes I think it'll be fruitful.
Well, let me just say this, and yes, that is great. But let's get back to the question. The question is about the funding, and I think this is a great question because everybody's talking about the funding of the police. Let's just take away their funds, okay? Take away the police. I mean, and see what happens. I mean, more Wendy's are going to get burnt down, and more stores are going to get burnt down, and more stores are going to be looted, and people are going to, you can't. The funding of the police department is based on the need. And usually, so you need to have a mission in place. There is a need, so the funds are based on the need, and then they're maintained on the value or the credibility or the validity of the need to the city or the municipality that is demanding the coverage. So it's either police coverage, it's either special kinds of units. There's funding for the police for even community policing. But you're defunding the police. You're saying that we do not want the police to be a part of our community. And when you reduce that, I think you get more problems. Now, people are saying defund the police and have alternatives for our youth. All right, let's face it. We do need the alternatives for our youth. We've already, in New York City, they've already changed the laws. Let me just tell you, bail reform. Some may say has helped people of color. I think it's hurting the city big time. As soon as you catch somebody coming out of stealing out of Gucci or iPhone and looting, we caught people coming out of looting, and soon as they're locked up, guess what? And they fight the police officer or whatever, they're back out again. You can't keep young people in jail because guess what? Bail reform. So nobody's kept in jail anymore. People don't really know what has already transpired. Laws have already been reformed to the point where they're reducing the amount of people that stay in jail in New York. So if you commit a property crime, you're not going to stay overnight in jail. You're going to have a DAT. You're going to be out. There's and even if you do see the judge, you're going to be out. There's no bail. It's bail reform. And the whole concept of bail reform is for equality, equal treatment. So you're saying, okay, if they have money, they can get out of their scenario, but the people that don't have money can't get out. So why don't you just get rid of bail altogether? Well, you can't throw the baby out with the bathwater because the truth be told, now you just let a violent person back on the street, selling back on the street. And that's the problem we have. So we're not even policing the kind of people that the Leslies, seniors, lieutenant and sergeant, retired, and our retired Jeff Faulkner, detective, have police. We're policing a group of people that know that they're not going to get any jail time. And guess what? You better not put your hand on. You better not touch them. They're going to record you. And so basically, the police have no power under the guise of the power that they have with the penal law. So I see you commit a crime. I have probable cause to arrest you, and now you're going to fight me, and I dare you, hit me too hard, or show some level of force that somebody doesn't like. I think people don't realize how policing has changed in our municipality. Now, we know why they've changed because of over-policing and abuse, and we can talk about that. I want to specifically talk about, we talked about a little bit, we touched on, unless there's another question, we touched on the murder of George Floyd in Minneapolis, but let's talk about the shooting incident in Atlanta, Georgia. Now, prior to that, I just wanted to say, and I'm already automatically know Lieutenant Leslie's take on it. We had a little discussion off the cuff of this, and I just want to go through this shooting really quickly of Rayshard Brooks. He was a 27-year-old that was sleeping in his car, and basically he failed the sobriety test. Cops were called to the Wendy's restaurant on University Avenue shortly after around 10:30 on last Friday. Officer Devin Brosnan, 26, found Brooks asleep in his car, blocking other drive-through customers, and called for backup. I saw the video when he actually knocked on the door and said, "Hey man, you're all right. Hey man, you're all right." He finally woke Mr. Brooks up. When Mr. Brooks was awakened, he had a short conversation with him. "Are you all right? Did you work? Have a long day at work?" You know, people called because you're blocking up the drive-through. You know, they want to get their 4 for 4. You know, so he's like, you know, oh, I'm sorry, I apologize. I said, all right, man, just pull over to the side and go to sleep. That's fine. You know, you had a long day. Just go. So he says, you're good. Yes. The officer walks away to walk back to his car. You see it. He walks away to go back to his car, and then he turns around and he looks and sees that the car does not move. He walks back over to the car and see that Mr. Brooks had fallen back to sleep. Now he knocks on the door. He knocks on the door, and he opens the door, and then now the officer is saying, "Hey, man, you know, I just told you to drive just a few feet away and to go to sleep, but you fell back to sleep. How much have you had to drink today?" He says, "No, not a lot." "Come on, I know you have. Did you drink today? How much did you have to drink?" He says, "No, not a lot." "All right, do me a favor, please pull over to the side. Come on, man, put over to the side." He actually gets up and he pulls over to the side. The officer goes back to his car, gets in, and he's like ready to, you know, he's debating within himself. I saw the body cam. He's debating within himself whether he should go, whether he should, man, should I deal with this? Now, I know what's in the officer's mind. Now, with most people that are watching and some of our panelists, I hope they admit the truth. We are more afraid of getting in trouble with the people on our job than getting hurt on the outside. Can somebody raise their hand and say amen? We are more afraid of getting hurt with your job or getting in trouble than the people now. So I know he's saying, man, if I let this guy go and you know, leave this guy in the car and he pulls over and kills somebody, I'm done. So he goes back to the car. He gets out of his car, go back to the vehicle, and says, "Hey," that's when he calls back up, talks to him a little bit, says, "This is crazy." He calls back up. The backup shows up, and when his partner arrived, Brooks takes a field sobriety test. Now, this is 30 minutes into it. He takes a field sobriety test 30 minutes into this conversation of having him. They take him out the car. They're talking to him. Brooks is actually polite. You know, he's awakened now. He's talking. Everything is calm. And once he failed the sobriety test, then they gave him the breathalyzer. After he fails that, then they have no choice but to put him in handcuffs. You can't send a person home after that. You just can't. Once you get to that point, you are obligated as a police officer. And I've watched CNN, I've watched Fox News. You cannot send people home. No, that's not a summons. This is DWI. Do you guys remember organizations as MAD, Mothers Against Drunk Driving? Y'all remember organizations like that, Mothers Against Drunk Driving? Come on now. I didn't hear any of them advocate in this particular case. You know, so drunk driving, DWI is a major problem. So this is what he does. He puts his hand behind his back, proceeding to arrest him, to take him in, and Mr. Brooks starts to fight violently. He just doesn't resist arrest by refusing to be arrested. He starts fighting the police brutally. He fights them, punching them, pushing them, slammed one officer, grabs the officer. So now the officer takes out his taser, because now this guy that was really nice, now he's fighting them. He goes to taser Mr. Brooks. Mr. Brooks grabs the taser and turns the taser on him and shoots the officer. Now the officer goes back. Then he runs away. Now he's running away. The officer's pursuing him. I'm just going without watching the videotape. If I get anything wrong, please let me know. The officer is pursuing him. As he's pursuing him, he turns back while he's running. Y'all see my arm? I don't know if you can see my arm here. He turns back while he's running, and he squeezes the trigger and he shoots at the officer. Now I know a lot of people, of course, Mr. Brooks then was the officer now takes out his firearm and fires a couple shots at Mr. Brooks, and then he falls to the ground. Now we have a scenario here that the officer shoots Mr. Brooks as a result of not just him fleeing, but as a result of him turning and shooting the taser at the officer. Now, here is the major debate. The first thing when I first heard this news was Mr. Brooks was shot in the back. Yes, that is true. he was shot in the back. What I would like to say here, based upon my experience, is that hands are the ones that can kill you. A face can't kill you. The back of your head, the front of your head, the front of your front vices, the side, your feet. What can kill you is your hands, because in your hands can hold weapons, right? So if that was a gun, I don't think we would have had a problem. But it wasn't a gun; it was a taser. Yet he still struck the taser to him. And the threat, although he was pursuing him, and notice the velocity, he was at least about 5 to 6 feet from Mr. Brooks. I would say if Mr. Brooks was to stop, he would have been on Mr. Brooks within a second. All right. So the velocity, the speed of running after Mr. Brooks, he turns, he fires, he missed. He now pulls out his weapon and he shoots. Good shoot, bad shoot. I'm going to give you 2 minutes. Good shoot, bad shoot. Jeff.
That's a tough one. Like I said, I worked in narcotics, and we always thinking the worst. If you just limit it to it being the taser, you probably could say it's a bad shoot. But being a police officer, we know that when we search somebody, we search for 1 gun, 2 guns, 3 guns, sometimes 4. They tell us to continue to search a person. When he was following the guy, he shot first time, and then he shot a second time. Second time, he says he saw a flash. You don't know if it's a gun. I don't know if he had a gun on him, because for him to fight and wrestle on the ground like that, I don't know if he has a second gun. He could have been turning around with a second gun. Shooting a fleeing felon is not permissible in NYPD. So once he was fleeing and then he shot him, it's a bad shoot.
Okay. So
if he was shooting while the guy was turning around, then that's something we can argue about. But
okay,
in my opinion, bad
that's
shoot.
what happened. Okay, so that's what happened. He was running, but he still turned and shot him.
Right.
So you're saying is that a good shoot or bad shoot?
If he's shooting while he's turning to shoot at him, I would say it's a good shoot, because, like I said, you don't know if it's the taser or if it's he had a gun hidden in his waistband or something.
He knew it was a taser, and there was no other gun we're talking about. We're not talking about any other gun. He knew it was a taser. Thanks, Jeff. I need to get to somebody else. All right, good shoot, bad shoot. Greg.
I was conflicted as well. Okay. And I agree with Jeff that the scenario lends yourself to, does he have a taser? Is it shooting? We all know the one misconception that I think everybody's had is that what consists in a taser. Most people look at a taser and they see what they see on TV, which is like a dry tase, and it's only skin on, to contact, when they don't know that it actually spits out prongs, these cartridges. So with that, in that particular, and we don't want a Monday morning quarterback, I get it. But if I see somebody pointing anything at me, I am thinking in that moment, do I need to pull my weapon and shoot back? Because factually what happened, that he shot or tried to shoot the officers with a taser, does that necessitate taser to gun? That, is it the same use of force, or is one deadlier than the other? Yes. So that would make it a bad shoot. You're not going to kill me with a taser, but you might immobilize me, and I don't know what you're going to do when you immobilize me, which would make me want to take you out. So factually, it's a bad shoot. If I was put in that same position, honestly, would I have pulled my weapon? I would have. Will I pull the trigger? Nobody knows. I don't know that. But I think this is probably one of the more hardest scenarios to gauge, because you see both happening. You see the officer being threatened. You see before that this, he was giving these officers problems. They could not handle him. So it's a rough one. It's a rough one.
All right.
That's my honest opinion.
It's not good. All right. Leon, Lieutenant Leslie. Well, Sergeant Leslie. I'll let both of y'all go at the same time. Y'all want to hold this together? Bad shoot, good shoot, Sergeant Leslie. Sergeant Leslie.
Well,
come on, talk to me.
Of course, where the bullets hit, it would seem like it's a bad shoot. But if you've never been in the shoes of a police officer and struggling with a person that you're trying to arrest, you don't know the feeling. You really don't know the feeling. You know.
But he was running away. He was running away.
Yeah, he was running away, but he turned around and he shot the taser.
With a taser. Is the taser a deadly weapon?
When he shot the taser, the gun, the officer did not have his gun out yet. That was a split-second decision that officer made. And as police officers, we want to go home at the end of the night. You know, they used to say when I was on the job, I'd rather be judged by 12 than to be carried by 6. So I don't want to be hurt out there. You see, and if you're resisting, you know, against a police officer, you know, somebody's going to get hurt or killed.
All right.
I think this is a hard one. This is hard.
Stephanie Crumpton had a question, and could you put it back up? Because she said a couple of questions. Didn't the officer pat him down first, so they knew he didn't have any other weapons? Didn't the officer have the taser in his hand and then drop the taser to grab his gun? And the answer is correct. She is totally correct in the leading question that she had, and I think Sergeant Leslie answered that. Lieutenant Leslie, go on with Stephanie Crumpton's question and go on and give your scenario. Good shoot, bad shoot, and give your reasons why.
Okay, Pastor.
And hold on, let me just say this. And do you think that this man deserves the death penalty? Because now he's being charged with felony murder, which is the death penalty. I'm very conflicted about this particular shooting. I am going to give you mine, but come on, Lieutenant, let's talk to me. What you think?
Pastor, permit me. I digress just a pinch, if you don't mind. I want to address an issue that I didn't address, which was defunding. I just want to speak to that for 1 second. I think that we already understand that the policies of the New York City Police Department are not addressing the African-American community's needs as far as our citizens go. So I think the changing of policies and streamline, because we must admit that crime has dropped in the New York City, especially since I've been on the job. Crime has dropped a whole lot, especially with
always going back up, sir.
I understand
all these changes.
But what I'm saying is it can't get near the thousands of deaths that when I first came on the job. So what I'm saying is, if we have that devastating drop in crime, why are police officers still addressing crimes that are not necessarily, felony crimes? We have things like drug abuse. They should be addressed by physicians, or you have problems like domestic violence. You have different issues that should be addressed by social workers. So I just wanted to address that issue where I think personally some of that police department budget should be defunded and taken into where police officers don't even respond. Police officers don't need to respond to issues that they don't have the skills or mandate to address. The second.
All right, but that I would like to take you up on a quick short spar debate on that one. I'm so sorry, because especially when it comes to you can't O.J. Simpson. All right, you think his wife and everybody needed a social worker to respond. The reality is issues like domestic violence, which shows violence, death, very violent people, drug abuse, and people that are dealing with drugs, drug addiction, very violent, very, very violent. Shootings, drugs, marijuana, drugs, all of those things, violent. You worked in Vice. You know that there's always guns and drugs and guns, and dealing with domestic violence in the very word is domestic violence. So I think that to say that a social worker can replace a police officer in those jobs, we don't go on those jobs because we want to go on those jobs. We're mandated by the state to go on those jobs because of the horrific crimes and deaths that has been happening. And that's why it's a mandated reporting. We have to report certain incidents that happen because of all of the things that transpired. Now, I do give you the fact that there can be some programs that can assist the police department, but I don't think that the job that we do should be replaced. Let's get on to the the Rayshard Brooks, the original question. Could you please go on and
I
answer that?
will address, yes, Pastor. And so we have a situation where I kind of disagree with some of the panelists. I think that the situation could have been handled better. And I say that because of the simple fact that I was in the identical incident. I had an individual that was robbed right in front of me. He was shot twice in the gut. I pursued the individual on foot. I jumped out of my vehicle and I was off duty and I pursued him. And there came a point where he turned his gun on me and I started to fire at him. I missed, but while I was firing, he turned back around and I stopped because I didn't want to hurt him if he was no longer a threat to me. And so there was no physical or imminent threat aimed at me at the time. I mean, initially, yes, he pointed his gun. I started to fire. But after he turned around, I had to think to myself, stop. And then he continued to run. I chased him maybe about 2 or 3 more blocks, and I caught him. But by that time, he had ditched the gun. But I say that to say, you know, if you look at the situation the way it was, he had time to think it out and stop. He was pulling his gun from his holster. First of all, the taser, I'll address 3 issues. One, was he armed? I don't believe he was armed because they had already searched him. The second was the taser. Taser only fires at maximum 2 cartridges, right? And I believe that one might have had just 1 cartridge. So once he fired and missed, at that point alone, he was unarmed. So now we have a situation where we're chasing an unarmed man. He turns his back to you. Do you fire? And do you take the time to value that life enough to think, maybe I should stop? And that's my query with him. And so when you ask me if he should go to jail, yeah, he should get locked up. He should get locked up because he should really use restraint.
All right. Thank you. Please put Stephanie's question back up there. She has another question. She says, Stephanie Crumpton, thank you so much for participating. She says, I respect that all officers want to go home at night. Thank you. I'm so glad that you do, because Lord knows I do. However, is that at the expense of taking another person's life?
No.
Don't you want to walk away from situations with no one losing their life as well? Absolutely.
That's right.
Absolutely. There's nobody that's on this particular panel that's going to at any way say that we want to take somebody's life and we don't care. No, this is the whole reason why we sign up for this job, to preserve life, to protect life. So, but at the end of the day, if it's between me or a perpetrator, it's going to be them. It's between the perpetrator or an innocent bystander, somebody I'm protecting. It's going to be the perpetrator, the criminal. But if I have to choose, okay, that's if I have to choose life. That's why when you pull this weapon out, it is
you better be ready.
Only for you. It is only to protect or preserve life, and it's only if you feel that your life is an imminent danger. Period. There's no other reason for you to pull this trigger. So when you pull the trigger, it is to either protect your life, save your life, or to save the life from another. And the only way doing that is to stop the threat. Now, let's go to this scenario and let me. So we got a lot of people that said bad shoot.
Let them run.
And I've been watching this, and I hold on. I got a quick. Trina Caldwell said, "What is the cycle voltage in the stun gun used by police officers releasing a cartridge? Is it possible to multiply?" Yes, Trina. And not only Trina Caldwell talk about the cartridge being able to immobilize somebody. There is also a dry stun that can immobilize you, and also Norm, who's a retired detective of 35 years. He talked about the taser immobilizing you, and I'm going to talk to you about this. Let me just walk you through what I believe the scenario was. After he fails his sobriety test and Mr. Brooks fights the police officer, pushes him over, grabs the officer's taser, which I think is reckless, and runs away. Nobody wants Mr. Brooks to die. You know, God knows I am, I believe in Black Lives Matter, but in this particular situation, I put myself in the same situation. And this is not an easy situation for me. And I'm going to tell you why. I'm going to give you the fact patterns of the law. Now, I'm engaging him. He's already resisting arrest. He takes the gun out. If he had my gun, if he had the officer's gun, I believe that Mr. Brooks at the time would have shot the officers. That's how enraged he was. That's the kind of scuffle they had. He takes it. Not only is he running away, he's running away. Run, man. Run, Forrest, run. Why do you have to turn around and pull the trigger, Mr. Brooks? Why do you have to turn around and try to harm the officer who's only trying to arrest you? The officer did not have his gun out. The officer didn't say, stop or I'll shoot. He's running, and he points his taser at the officer's taser at the officer, and shoots. He shoots. You see the stun gun lights up. He shoots the dart at the officer. Now, once he shoots at the officer, notice the velocity, the speed. I'm running toward. If he would have stopped right there, it would have been a second, and he would have ran right into him. All Mr. Brooks had to do was just stop and turn around. He would have ran right into him, and he could have dry stunned and tased him, which he had the capability of immobilizing the officer. If Mr. Brooks immobilized the officer while running away, could he, in a split second, turn around and take the officer's weapon and shoot him? Absolutely. Absolutely. I can't tell you what was in the officer's mind when he was running, but as a cop, when I see him running and not running with his gun, he's running. But until Mr. Brooks turns around and the person that's fleeing from me is now a threat while he's running from me, okay, it doesn't matter whether he turns his back or not. He put his arms. Your hands kill you, not front or back. So if he would have turned around, would that have made the difference? No, he shot him in the back. He shot him in the back because he was running, but he was shooting. He was still a threat. He was a threat to the officer. Now the question is whether he was a deadly threat. Okay, now that's the question. Everybody that saw it, you cannot say that Mr. Brooks was no longer a threat while the officer was chasing him. But the officer stopped chasing him. Officer, stop doing your job. You shouldn't chase people. That's what people are saying. You shouldn't chase people. No, I mean, we grew up this high watching and playing cops and robbers. Guess what? Cops don't stop chasing you until they find bad boys. What you gonna do? What you gonna do when we come for you? We got songs in our head. We don't stop running. We don't stop chasing you. There was no crime of the officer chasing Mr. Brooks. There was no crime for the officer struggling with Mr. Brooks. If anybody committed a crime so far, it was Mr. Brooks. Now, after he tases him from behind, the officer takes out his weapon and shoots. Once he shoots, now here is where we have a problem. Now, he shoots, and once he shoots him, he fires his deadly physical weapon. People are saying, now, was there an imminent threat of not only of deadly physical injury? Is the stun gun a deadly weapon? That's the question. Now, let me just tell you that a week ago, prior to this event, 5 officers was fired by the mayor of Atlanta because the DA said that they used a deadly physical weapon to stun these two college students. They were fired because the DA, and I quote, said they used a deadly physical weapon. Now, that's what he said. Now, in New York City, a taser is not considered a deadly physical weapon, but that is what the DA said, to use a deadly physical weapon to stun these particular people. And these officers were fired because of that incident. All right. So now you're fired for using a deadly physical weapon, but now you point that thing at me and I can't fire my weapon. Okay, that's a problem. The second problem that we have with that is the rush for judgment. Those officers did not, and listen, I'm not advocating for white man, black man. I'm advocating for the procedures of the law, of policing. Okay, those officers did not have what we call due process. They did not have due process. Hold on. If he can disable the officer, then the officer's life is in danger. Absolutely, John B. Smithen. if he shoots, if he would have hit the officer would have went down. All he had to do was turn around and take his gun. All he had to do was turn around. He could have just hurt the officer because he's using a force that could destabilize the officer and cause him to be immobile. Now, someone would say, well, what about his partner? His partner was already tased, and his partner was way behind. So Trina Caldwell says, if a taser can immobilize an individual, I would say the officer's actions were justified, not to say the officer's intention was to shoot to kill in this scenario. However, optically, we can all see where the threat was. Trina Caldwell, I happen to agree with you on this one. Let me further just give you some other information regarding this case that people really don't know about. Not only did the mayor fire those officers on the spot, fire that officer who shot on the spot, the DA overcharged the officer, and this is the reason why I said the DA overcharged the officer. It's not like New York, and everybody cannot just put every scenario like it's New York. New York is a very sophisticated city. This DA has a separate. He was up for election, okay? And he already had an issue where there was corruption and other stuff and allegations. He could not get. There was a lot of pressure on this district attorney to render them some cop blood, especially in Minneapolis. So you have an overcharge. Do anybody believe that officer deserves the death penalty in the process of his job? Up until the time where he fires his weapon, there was nothing that the officer did wrong, in my opinion. There was no over abuse. There was nothing. So now let's see what Dean Norm Nice said. Do you think that for any rank in the NYPD, should background checks be evaluated before getting promoted as well as other arrests do? I'm going to answer that, Norm. Let me just finish this quick scenario so I can allow my counterparts to respond to my very radical views in regard to this. I'm really going against the folks that's talking on CNN, that's talking on Fox, based upon what I know and what I've seen. Come on, I'm gonna give you guys an opportunity to rebut.
Well, you also got to add in the fact that after he shot him, he then ran up to him and started kicking him. I mean, so that showed a little bit of a desire to hurt him that was beyond just shooting him. And I think that's factored in.
Let me answer that. Let me answer that, Jeff. And that's a very good point. But that's a separate incident. Once he's shot, you can't link the two. We're talking about the shooting. Now,
but I'm saying is that
I don't agree that the officers, he has to articulate why he kicked the man and why they didn't render aid in the proper time. That officer has to articulate that in court. We're talking about the shooting. We're talking about up until the time he pulled his weapon and shot the shot. The stuff afterward is separate because it's all judged separate. It's not just one continuous event, because after you shot somebody, that's part of it's over. How he addressed it afterward is two different scenarios. The adrenaline, everybody that's involved in the shooting, we all know that we go to the hospital for what? Everybody say it. 1, 2, 3, trauma. Right? We all go we all go after a shooting. We all go to the hospital for trauma because we were involved in the shooting. I'm not that officer. In his head, I can't articulate why he did that. I disagree with the fact that he did that, but I'm going to tell you that up until the point of the shooting, the officer has to say that I believe that my life was in danger. And I just don't see it black and white that they went out to kill Mr. Brooks. Mr. Brooks did not comply. Mr. Brooks was very violent. Mr. Brooks ran away, but he tried to hurt the officers while they were pursuing him. Back to you, Jeff, and back to you, Leon.
Well, I agree with you 100%. What I was trying to say is that the reason why everybody is on the fence about the shooting is because of his actions afterwards made it appear that the shooting itself was something that was intentional, because he had this amount of anger to kick him afterwards. You're 100% right about up until the shooting, that's what you're going to be judged by. But in today's time, with all the things that's going on, for him to continue to go over and kick him enraged everybody who's already mad.
I agree. Leon?
And so,
Lieutenant, excuse me, Leon. Lieutenant Leslie.
yes,
Leon is the one beneath you.
Respecting everyone's opinion. We can have hypotheticals, right? Until the cows jump over the moon. The fact of the matter is, right? The taser was discharged. At the point the taser was discharged, it missed. We all know as officers that taser didn't have anything else in it. So at that point, he's unarmed. And so now we have to make a decision. Am I going to, he's running away. He shot the taser. He missed me. Now, do I fire? Do I squeeze off? Am I going to squeeze off? That's my problem with him, right? After he fires that taser, there should be some restraint.
I think that's
very good observation. Who's trying to talk?
It's great. I think that's right. But I believe, when we talk about use of force, they use a word called the totality of circumstances, and you have to take in consideration what happened before that taser was shot. Okay, so before we even got there, the physical, mental anguish that was going on, like I said before, Brooks was giving these two cops a run for their money. He had taken the taser from the cop while they were wrestling around on the floor. He actually mounted one of the cops when they were on the floor, if you see it in the video, right? So you take that, then you fast forward to now you're in a position where, let's put it like this. If I'm in that position, I'm already thinking, if this guy gets me on the ground again, if I give him choice number two, if I give him chance number two to get me down on the ground, I'm done.
He killing me.
I'm done. Okay, so we can't not take into consideration, and this is why this is difficult, because if we're thinking what led up until this point, you have to say that officer had rightful cause to believe that if I let this man get me again, my life is done. So just like we all know.
Steph. Yeah. All right, good. Come on, give you the 5 seconds to close. I want to jump into the question.
No, you're good.
Hold on. All right. 1 second, Leon. Leslie. Stephanie Crumpton says, do you feel that the officer could have done something differently that would have resulted in Mr. Brooks still being alive? Let me just pause to answer that, and I've deferred to the experts on the panel. I just want to answer that. I want to say this, and also piggyback on what Lieutenant Leslie and Detective Griggs said. Basically, and even what Detective Faulkner said. Basically, at that point in time, yes, I agree with Lieutenant Leslie that once he fired the second shot, there was nothing in the gun. But he's not unarmed, sir, because he not only does he have the dry stun, and once you shoot the shots, that thing can still give you the same kind of pain once it's pressed up against you as it does from the shot. And number two, when you're in the motion of getting knocked down, punched, all that, are you counting bullets? Are you counting how many times? You're not counting any of that. So as far as I'm concerned, 1, 2, he only got one more. He has an empty cartridge. When you at home, you can count. Okay, 1 shot, 2 shots, 3 shots. Okay, 6 shots. Well, come on, let's get him. Nobody's counting.
No,
I don't even know whether he was hearing. You can't. When you're in it, when you're fighting. I remember one time I was fighting, and I was actually. I remember I was in 1909 Amsterdam in the 30 precinct. The 30 and the 33 is right there on 155 Street in Manhattan. And I had a scenario where I had a robbery pattern in my building, and then. At the time, I was doing verticals, and this group policing, we don't do that. Back in the day, I was doing my verticals by myself, checking my own development. I saw a guy hanging in a stairway. I knew him. I say, "How's it going, man? How's it going? Everything good?" He said, "Yeah." And I touched his waist. I said, "Hey, I didn't just touch his waist. All right, cool." And when I touched his waist, I felt his gun. When I felt the gun, I grabbed him. He turned around and he threw me down the stairs. I held on to his hoodie. And we tumbled down the stairs. When we tumbled down the stairs, his gun came out. My gun fell out. Believe it or not, my gun fell out. I grabbed my gun. He goes up the stairs. He grabs his gun. Right? When he goes up the stairs, he grabs his gun. I'm coming up the stairs. I assume position. He never turns. All right. So leave Norm's question up there. He never turns. I'm running up the stairs. I go through it. I had a shot, but his back was turned. He had the gun in his hand. He never turned. I continue to pursue him. And then when I went to the next stairway, I lost him. I'm on the radio. I called the, 1013 85. Everybody came. And when my backup got there and I'm fighting the guy, we fell down two flights of stairs. We fell down a flight of stairs. We saw the gun fill up and boom, we fell down another flight of stairs. And the second flight of stairs is when my gun came out. Now I'm chasing him up. He grabs his gun. I get a shot. I don't shoot him. I lose him in the building. I call my guys from PSA 6. They come running. They show up. Yo, you had a shot? I said, yeah. You didn't shoot him? What's wrong with you? They were upset at me because I didn't shoot. The sergeant pulls me aside and says, calm down. If you didn't feel to shoot him, it was okay for you. Now, can I tell you that I exercise restraint? No. Because the truth be told, as soon as he fought me already, as soon as he had that gun in his hand and turned, I had every right to shoot that man. But I didn't. And thank God I didn't. You know why? Because when we finally found him and when we found the gun was fake. It was a pellet gun. I probably would have felt horrible, although justified, that I shot a person that had a pellet gun. But I'm saying that to say that when you're in the situation, you're all of those faculties and your ability to Monday morning quarterback and he shot once, you should have known the second. I heard the DA say that. I'm like, really? Have you ever been in the scuffle?
Have you ever been
how many times? Yeah, it's not so easy. Oh, I counted the tase. I counted the bullets. So in my opinion, I don't know whether the officer counted those bullets or not. Maybe he didn't. One thing I do know is that he saw him shoot that laser, the taser at him. He goes to duck, and then he responds with his weapon. So I have to answer Stephanie Crumpton's question, and that is, was there another way? I think that the number one, let's just say that the first way or the best way that this whole scenario could have and should have been resolved is that Mr. Ray Shard Brooks would have complied. If Stephanie Crumpton, if he would have complied, we would not be here debating over the shooting. That's the first thing. Okay, let's deal with the reality. Nobody on CNN or Fox News is going to say that, but I'm going to tell you that. Number one, he should have complied with the police. He was drunk. He shouldn't have fought. He should have complied. Period. Now, the fact that he didn't comply and he fought the police and escalated the situation in this particular thing. Do I believe that it could have been different? Yes, it could have been different. The cop could have said, let him run and not chase him. He could have gotten his car. It could have been, a lot of things could have been different. But it's very unfortunate. He didn't have to fire his weapon. He could have did what Lieutenant Leslie said. He could have stopped and continued to chase him or stop and call for backup. It could have been done a different way. But it didn't have, although it could have been done a different way, it did not have to be done that way. I still don't believe that the officer's actions was unlawful, particularly because he was in fear. If he was in fear or imminent danger of his life. And we've already described to you the scenario that if the stun gun, let's just say that he shot both bullets, and at the force that the officer's running to Mr. Brooks, if Mr. Brooks would have just turned around and pointed and stabbed him with the taser, the officer would have been done on the floor because that taser is active. It's a dry stun. It can hurt you. So that's it. Dean Norm Nice. My last question, do you agree or disagree with the higher echelon officers dealing with the protesters to keep the peace during the recent protests? I'll let you guys answer that. Anybody want to jump on that?
Yes.
All right. Detective Griggs says yes, he agrees. Anybody else agree?
I agree.
Yes.
I agree. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Leslie's agreed.
Showing in solidarity. Yes.
Leslie Jr.
Yes.
Yes.
Kenya.
Yes.
Detective Faulkner, do you agree or disagree?
Yes, I agree.
Okay, well, there you have it, Norm. We all of us agree that the officers were good. I'm gonna tell you right now, and I have to say this: the white officers on our job vehemently disagree, and particularly because they believe that it's compromising who we are as police. I keep telling them that they really need to understand about bridging the gap. We need to see that the police are not against us, that they are bridging the gap with us. So them kneeling with us is saying that, listen, we understand that there's some issues with the department and we're here to reconcile. And reconciliation is always good in my book. All right, last question from Stephanie Crumpton. I'm so glad we're blessed to you. Can you address the fact that officer had the option to use the taser in his hand, but he switched to the, let me just say this. You can't do taser for taser. The fact, let me just, you can't do taser for taser. If the officer truly believed that the taser was an imminent threat, as he pursued this man, he was an imminent threat with him at the time. He pulled his weapon out and he stopped the threat. That's it. You know, and the question is, he's going to have to prove that in the court of law, that he was in imminent danger and threat of his life, and that's it. But you're not going to see a cop dealing at the same level of resistance as somebody else. In other words, you know, you fight and you want to fight me one-on-one. I had many. This was to answer your question, Stephanie. Everybody on here, including the women, I'm certain. I've had people on there to challenge them. Come on, you want to fight? Yo, you think you all that? Take that dumbbell off and give me let's go one-on-one. All right? Let's go one-on-one. We don't go one-on-one. We never go one-on-one. We go 1-on-5. We go 1-on-10. We don't go one-on-one. Because this is not about the fact that whether I'm able to throw my hands. It's the fact that I have power to arrest you because you've committed a crime. There's never going to be an equal footing. Okay? No. So the same thing. You're not going to see a person out there with a stick and my baton. And we're clacking sticks and batons back and forth. No, if you pull out a stick, now I think that you have the power to knock me in the head and take my gun, put the stick down, put the knife down, and then I'm going to discharge my weapon. In other words, when you go up a level, I have to go above the level that you go in order to stop the threat. We're not going to have sword fights in the street. Right. Okay, so it's unfortunate. Don't challenge the police. It is what it is. If you challenge the police with a stick, he's going to take out his gun. If you challenge him with a knife, he's not going to pull out another knife. He's going to take out his gun. However, and that's it. This is absolutely necessary platform. Thank you. All right, she said thank you. I wanted to share that with you. If there's any other questions or any other, and while they're getting questions, and we're going to come to a close, I'm going to give you guys like 7 more minutes. And then we're going to come to a close. I see a question here. Do you think race, this is from Lieutenant Ozuna, do you think race and anything to do with the officer's decision to shoot its weapon? Okay, had anything to do with the officer's decision. No. Do you think race had anything to do? Anybody?
I honestly don't.
Leon, you think this is a Lieutenant Leslie? You think you thought this was a bad shooting? Do you think race?
I do not believe that it was a bad shooting. However, I do question the officer's judgment on discharging his weapon.
Do you think race had anything to do with the officer's decision?
I answered the question. Oh. Did I not answer the question out there on TV line?
No, it had nothing to do with race.
No, I don't think so.
The officer's instinct. It's the officer's
I don't think so.
But
again, you have to have value.
Thank you,
an individual's life. You have to have value for life.
No, I don't believe it had anything to do with race.
Now, okay, good. Now that everybody unanimously think that, do you believe that it's being carded as a race shooting on CNN, Fox News, and every other news station? Absolutely.
Yes.
Come on, guys. This is on the heels of one of the most worst murders in police custody. Absolutely. So nobody here thinks it had to do with race, but the truth be told, all over the news channels is only depicted as a race shooting. Sandra Huff sends a question: how can we teach Black young men how to respect the police that they have come to fear and hate? Wow, that's a good one. That's a good one. The youngest Black man that's on here. Let's talk to Leon Jr., young Black man. The reason why I'm picking on you is because you're closer to you're a millennial, and you are a young man, and a lot of your counterparts fight the police. How can we teach young men like yourself or younger than you to respect the police they come to fear and hate, and they had some legitimate reasons to do so?
Well, I just think that it's a respect thing for both officers and young Black men. When officers start to respect the community that they work in, then I feel like there will be some sort of a change. I'm not saying that all officers like disrespect the community that they work in, but some do, and I feel like young black men, they decide like, okay, I'm not with the police. Like, this is how they disrespect me in my community. Like, as an African American police officer, young man, when I go into like the 7-7 or a black community, I feel like the young people respect me because I'm an African American male doing the job, and they kind of disrespect, you know, others because they feel like they're this is not their community. So they just need a better understanding, and the cops, other cops, need to respect the community more. And I think that's like when you get a mutual respect, then that's when the young African American males will 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 respect the officers more.
Officer Leslie, that was excellent. And let me just add to that. That was excellent, by the way. If anybody else wanted to answer that question.
I was gonna add to that, and you're absolutely correct. I think respect breeds respect. But I also I believe, in addition to that, I think us as parents, we have to focus more on painting a positive identity of our neighborhood policing as well. One of the on patrol, one of the worst things that I hear that really gets under my skin is when I run into a kid with his mom or dad, and they say, "So you better be good today, or they're gonna lock you up." I hate hearing it.
Mm-hmm.
I hate hearing
Yeah,
it.
I've heard
They
that.
do
I've
use
heard
You
that.
that.
understand what I'm saying?
Very good. Very
These are
good.
the things that imprint on their minds.
Right.
And they can be the purest of minds at that time, but they're always going to come back to those types of moments. So I think we have to be better at dispelling a lot of the negatives as well, along with that.
Good answer. John B. Smith says, teach young men what their rights are by the law. And I think that's important, John B. But I think if they have hate, they're going to use that law to try to buck against any kind of compliance or authority with the police.
Right.
I think that community policing is at the heart of the matter. In other words, engaging the public when there's no need to engage them, engaging the public and talking to the young people when there is no need to talk to them. They have done nothing wrong, but the cops and programs and things that we have, instead of defunding the police, let's bridge the gap in the police departments and the communities, and let's cause there to be conversations. Let them see the human side, and that there is a lot of the people of diversity, black and brown, meaning there's people that speak their language. We have Hispanic officers, we have Asian officers, we have officers from the Caribbean, and the youth need to see that there are models and role models in every culture in the police department, particularly the NYPD, and to be able to share in that, so that we can start to build that dialogue that Officer Leslie says that they need to be given respect, and when we give respect, then we can kind of get that respect back. As a mother, I'll put that question back. I was just about to read that question. She said, as a mother of a teen, we also need to teach our youth respect. Now, that's true, because respect goes on both sides. All right, there's another question, and we're coming to a close, ladies and gentlemen, but teach young black men what their rights are by the law. As I said before, as I addressed that already, that we do need to teach them what their rights are, but we also need to teach them what their wrongs are. And when they are in the wrong, they have to understand that there's accountability, there is authority, and the officer has been commissioned, not just only by God, but by the state of New York or whatever municipality or city that they're in, and also all the way back up. Our backup goes to, we got backup for days. We call for backup. More police officers shows up. If there's not enough cop, we go for who? The National Guard. The National Guard is not enough. We go for the Air Force, the Navy, the Marines. We are the government. We are law enforcers. We enforce the law of the government. So we always will have backup. So you're not going to win when we have the authority or the law on our side. Cynthia Cordero. Hey, Cynthia. She's also a retired police. Programs that existed years ago in the NYPD worked well in teaching young Black men. Many lives were changed, and the fruit of it is still evident now. Yes, you are right. There was a wonderful programs in the PAL. There's a lot of different programs that were available, and we do need to bring those programs back. But they require funding, and if you defund the police, you won't have those programs. So there's a big debate about that. All right. What we're going to come to a close. I got these questions still coming in, so let me just answer these questions before we land the plane.
I just quickly wanted to shed light on some programs that are currently addressing the issue of bridging the gap with law enforcement and our young Black youth. And I wanted to just mention there's an organization called Mob United, which has a great partnership with Noble Mentors. They go into the schools and mentor the young Black children. Also,
what is Noble? Because hold on, that's another acronym that people may not know.
National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Executives. They have programs in place now where they are bridging the gap with dealing with our young people and the police, and offering different programs to bridge that gap. Also, our community affairs. We have many officers in community affairs that are have programs in development to help bridge that gap with dealing with our young men. Also, New York City Together is another good program that is in collaboration with the police department, and that's under Chief Madry in Brooklyn Patrol Brooklyn Bureau North. Then we have our Youth Leadership Council, which goes into many of the schools within New York City. So there are lots of programs. Unfortunately, it's not something that's shed light on, and it's not glorified in the media. But there's definitely programs in place and have been within the last 10 years that that I've been doing, like mentoring and things like that of that nature. So definitely there are programs in place, and we got to just keep it going, keep bridging that gap for our young people, and hopefully at some point some type of change will happen.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Thanks so much. Thank you, Faye. Maureen Butler, State Supervisor. She says excellent panel. And back to Ms. Dobson's comment. She basically said that she agreed with Detective Grigg regarding the conditioning that began at home. And she said, especially in her capacity as a child welfare professional, that there has to be some cooperation, parenting, and the police department. We can't be against each other. That's in the gist of what she's saying. So good stuff. About two. Stephanie, all right. About 2 years ago, Detective Grigg did a panel at our church and made a great comment to the young people, which was paraphrasing: when you are stopped by police, it's better to comply in the moment. Your power comes the next day when they write the report, or you have to see the judge. Yes, but that's good. Thank you, Stephanie. We say comply to complain. I'll survive the experience and live to sue another day. So we just want to say I'm going to just we're going to close now. I want everyone to have their last closing statements. I'll end with mine. We'll start out with Jeff, Detective Faulkner, retired Officer Leslie. We'll hear from Sergeant Leslie and Lieutenant Leslie. We'll hear from Detective Grigg. We're going clockwise order. We'll hear from Kenya Bolden, and then from yours truly. Last closing statements.
Well, thanks for having me. Thanks for having me on the forum with you guys today. I think it's something that is very needed, and it brought out a lot of points of the things that's going on in our society right now. And hopefully things like this can help us bridge the gap with our youth and give people an understanding of what Black officers have to endure while inside the NYPD. I think this is something that can continue and maybe will make a huge difference in our society.
Awesome. Officer Leslie.
Junior, me?
Junior, Officer Leslie.
Yeah.
Your parents outrank you, sir. They both
Yeah,
outrank you.
I just want to say thank you for having me on the panel. I got to see a lot of different perspectives that I didn't even know about. I didn't even hear from you guys that are on the panel. So it was very informative for me. So just thank you for having me on.
Awesome. You got a great career ahead of you. We expect some great things from you. Awesome.
Thank you.
Sergeant Leslie.
I want to say thank you, Dr. Campbell, for having us. Well, I'm speaking for myself, having me on this panel. I've learned, like my son has said, about the different perspectives that we all have on this panel tonight. I think it was very engaging, very informative, and I look forward to, future forums. And I want to ask everybody to please continue to pray for the police officers, all of the essential workers that are out there in the line of fire, because it's not an easy job. It's not an easy job. Thank you, Pastor. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Lieutenant Leslie, highest ranking member here.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And so I just want to say, Pastor, I think this is awesome. I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. I want every listener to know that I have the best pastor this side of heaven. Just so y'all know, right? Who y'all listening to is the best pastor in the world.
Awesome.
Right?
Thank you so much.
I want to thank all the rest of the panelists for your contributions. You guys did an awesome job. Also, I want to tell the listeners, policing is a hard job. As you can hear from some of the stories and the details in the story, it is not an easy job, right? And sometimes it requires a split-second decision, a decision that can affect your family, your entire surroundings for the rest of your life. So don't be so harsh and judgmental when it comes to police officers. Sometimes it's just a difficult split-second decision, and they make it as best they can. Sometimes it's a bad decision, sometimes it's a good decision. But bear with us, right? Pray for us, understand us, love us, and I'm talking all police officers. Those bad ones, pray for them. Pray that they'll get it straight. The good ones, help them out. Pray for them. Encourage them. So God bless you all. Thank you all for joining us. We appreciate you. And like I said again, respect each other, pray for each other.
Amen. Amen. I would say pray and report. Don't just pray for them. Pray for them and report them. No, we need an action. Pray and report them.
And paper too.
Pray and report. Right. Now, before I move on to Detective Grigg, I just have we're closing, but please don't log off and listen. This is going to be good. The question I'm going to ask: we got 2 Black officers. We got basically people that did over 20 years of service, sergeant and lieutenant. All right, you got this crazy, unpredictable job, and then you got your son, encourage your son to join this police department. We went, as crazy as this job is, as difficult as this job is, you have enough appreciation for the job to have your son follow in your footsteps. Now, I can't just gloss over that. You got to speak to that for us. Help us, let us see the other side. As crazy as it is, as in a split second, in a split second, you can lose your life or lose the job, but at the same time, you can save a life. Tell us why you would even encourage your son to follow in your footsteps, being that it's such a risky assignment.
Go ahead.
Well, first of all, he watched us. So what he was seeing, I guess he fell in love with that aspect of it. Remember, the job is not all a bad job. In our careers, we go to a lot of beautiful things. We took him to a lot of beautiful places since he was little. And what was that thing with Timberland?
Police Foundation.
Right, we would take him to different
organizations and funds and events. But he like my husband said, he has watched us, and there you know, there are so many opportunities within the police department. You can do whatever you feel that you want to do, wherever your mind can take you in the police department. No one can hold you down. And my son has watched us through the years. I mean, like he said, you know, we as African Americans, we have to do things at a 110% level. You see, so he's seen the struggle. He's seen the struggle of us studying to make rank. Because you know, I hate to say this, but you for our police officers, if you want to make a difference on the job, study and make rank. Then you'll be able to do just you can make a change. You can make a big change if you only study and apply yourself to, you know, to what's available. It's only a test. It's hard, but you can do it. You can do it.
Thank you. Detective Greg.
Well, thank you.
Closing
again.
remarks.
Thank you again for allowing me to be a part of this. I feel privileged, Pastor. Thank you for the idea. I think there needs to be more of this going around, of honest conversation about honest experiences. You know, to those who are watching, you know, this was the real deal. You know, take everything that we said, you know, for what it is, you know, and know that we're police officers, but we're human. You know, we have warm blood running through our veins, just like you do. We have thoughts, we have feelings, we have families. And, you know, we try to bring that same love for our families to our neighborhoods that we police at the same time. So, you know, God bless you all. Stay prayerful. And as I always say, you know, leave nobody behind. You know, if you see me slacking, pick me up, bring me with you. You know, we in this time that we have to band together and put our differences aside and really, you know, have a common goal. So, you know, let's be better together.
Thank you. Officer Bowden.
Yes, I just want to say thank you again for having me a part of this panel. It's definitely been a pleasure, especially interacting with you know, what people chiming in to say. And I think this is definitely something that is much needed, something that should continue. This should not be the last panel that we have. We should have many more, because there's so much more layers to discuss in this issue, and also what we can do in the future and what we can do to make changes and building those gaps and bridging those relationships with the community and our young Black youth. And I just think it's definitely something that we definitely need to keep going. And you know, people are definitely interested in this platform. You know, I have community leaders, professors who have reached out to me personally that want to, you know, see more of this and want to continue this type of dialogue with law enforcement. So we definitely have to continue to bridge this gap, you know, with the community, because people are looking for it. You know, we're not, I don't, you know, we're not as vocal as we need to be. And when we do come out and we are vocal, people do very, very much appreciate it. And that's what they're looking for. And that's what they want.
Awesome. Thank you, Kenya. Thank you to everyone. In closing, let me just say thank you to our panelists. I just want to say, as you heard this invigorating conversation, policing is not so easy or so simple. There's a lot of moving parts. There's district attorneys, there's mayors, there's political figures that influence decisions that go on. There is something called due process. And then sometimes the due process is skipped and negated. And whenever that happens, you know, the public is definitely going to go on the side of whatever action the person that was in power took. And we do have to let things play out in the court of law. And I think it's important that we see all sides. The Bible talks about my people that are destroyed for the lack of knowledge. And I think, you know, I want to know. Inquiring minds want to know. Show me the truth. I also wanted the public to see that it's not all peaches and creams behind the wall. there's a blue wall, but there's some, scuffling going on behind the blue wall. But it's not that bad, but there are some disagreements behind the blue wall. And so with, all this blue wall of silence, no, there's no great harmony behind the wall. There is something that holds us all together. And we love the job, and we love to preserve life and protect people and protect each other. But when those things are not happening, there's other things that are happening behind that wall. And I wanted you to get a peek of that. And we got it through the testimony of the panelists. I also want you to consider not just only looking at one news station. Very, very important. I just wanted to just help you. We have, let's just give you the extremes. We have Fox News, and then we have CNN and NBC, and MS. I always get that mixed up.
MSNBC.
MSNBC. Yes, MSNBC. And we have CNN, and we have Fox News. I say you watch all of them. I don't think that you should just stay on Fox News. I don't think you should just stay on CNN. You have to watch both to get a broader perspective. This cannot be about partisanship, about whether I'm Republican or whether I'm Democrat. You got a lot of black Republicans, and you got a lot of white Democrats. It's not about race. It's about what's right. And sometimes I am on the Republican side. Sometimes I'm on the Democratic side. So I love to be an independent, but independents don't have any power these days. But just to let you know that it's very, very important for you to be a well-rounded individual and to know the facts and not just follow the crowd. In church and the word of God, we'll say kind of follow the cloud, not the crowd. And in closing, we are a church. I'm a pastor, not just a member of the service. So I'm going to tell you that the Lord is the answer. Prayer is the answer. The Bible says, if my people, which are called by my name, will humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then will I hear from heaven. I will forgive them of their sin and heal their land. We need to pray for those in power. The Bible tells us to respect them in Romans chapter 13, but we need to pray for them. We need to pray for our government, and we need to be active participants in what goes on in our local municipalities by voting, by volunteering, by speaking. You should know who your commanding officer is of your precinct. You should go to your community board meetings, and you should be involved. Don't be reactive, be proactive. That's it, my friends. I hope you enjoyed this. Share it, and I hope somebody benefited from this. May the Lord bless you. On this, I want to say Happy Father's Day to all of the fathers that are here. Certainly Happy Father's Day to you, Detective Faulkner, to you, Detective Grigg, and to you, Lieutenant Leslie. Happy Father's Day to you. This coming Sunday, we will be celebrating Father's Day here at Restoration Christian Ministries, and we will be having an outdoor service. And we know that COVID-19 hit us hard. We have been on quarantine. We do not gather for church on Sunday morning. We have what is called a virtual worship service. However, on our 10th year anniversary, which was the first Sunday in June, we had an outdoor service on the side of the church. We closed the block. The commanding officer of the 4-7 precinct, Inspector Hernandez, which is really friendly to this particular congregation and neighborhood, gave us the permission to have services outside. And we're going to have an outside service on this coming Sunday. We want you at 11 a.m. You can drive in and stay in your car in the wonderful air condition. You can roll down your windows and enjoy the service, or you can get out, sit on the hood of your car, or actually sit in the seats that we have set out in the street. So there was people everywhere. There was people on the terraces. They were just everywhere, and they enjoyed the service. We want you to come out and enjoy the fellowship. We will be feeding people on having a wonderful breakfast on for the men and for their families on Sunday morning at 9:30 and at 11 o'clock sharp. We're going to have a powerful service, a Father's Day service to the Lord. As you can see, these are my parishioners. Every last person that is up here on the panel and those that left, they're all members of Restoration Christian Ministry. They're a part of our church. And we know that you have many people that are part of your church that are police officers. So we integrate in society. We're not just aloof. We are part of you. You are a part of us. So let's come together and let's overcome in Jesus' name. God bless you and have a great evening.
Good night.
Have a good night, guys.
Good night, everyone.
Take care.
Happy Father's Day to the fathers.
Happy Father's
Happy
Day,
Father's
everyone.
Day.
Father's
Woo.
Day.
Father's Day.
Take care. God bless.
Okay.
Okay. Bye-bye now.